I'm Skip Elsheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime streaming show. I'm going to try to turn on a light here. Hold on. So, does that help? A little bit. Have a ham in the comments said, on YouTube comments said, no band hammer, just rainbows and sunshine. Well, the sunshine is overpowering my webcam, and it's putting me in the shadows. So, there you go. Anyways, yes, I like that. Both YouTube and Facebook eventually took down the video. And it's all because of a British information service film called Your Children's Meal, and some mysterious group that is claiming the copyright on it on behalf of somebody. And I don't think it's the British Information Service. I think it's somebody else who's claiming it, and they shouldn't be claiming it. Anyhow, we're just going to keep showing 16mm films, and if YouTube decides they don't want it, then we'll just keep showing it. And if Facebook decides they don't want it, we'll just keep showing it. And Twitch so far has not kicked us off, so that's always a plan B. Okay, anyways, let's learn about some moped safety. Enjoy.
No, Shirley.
Why not? What are you afraid of?
Well, it's just that you're inexperienced.
That's why I want to learn. I'll be careful.
I know.
Don't you trust me?
Sure, it's not that.
Then what is it?
Well, look at all this traffic. Somebody might...
What traffic? That's why we came here, remember? It's perfect. Look, you told me yourself it's almost as easy as riding a bicycle. Come on, please.
Well, it means that much to you, okay. Girls, all alike. Just remember, I worked hard to pay for this thing, and if you wreck it, you're in big trouble, lady.
Relax, I can do it. Just give me the facts.
This is the rear brake right here. Just that. That?
Here you go.
Like Shirley, a lot of people these days are eager to experience the joy of mopedling. That's a fact of life. The number of mopeds on the nation's streets is increasing rapidly as people of all ages fall in love with this unique form of transportation. The reasons for the public's growing romance with the moped are fairly obvious. Compared to the automobile, a moped is inexpensive to purchase and maintain. A moped has an automatic transmission, which makes the vehicle easy to operate in traffic. And perhaps most important, the typical moped averages about 135 miles per gallon of precious fuel.
You know, I think she's got the right idea.
And finally, riding a moped is just plain fun.
I love it!
Although a moped is an enjoyable and inexpensive form of transportation, the new rider must realize that it's not a toy. It's a motor vehicle, and as such must be used responsibly. The moped is subject to the same traffic laws as the other vehicles with which it shares the road. And because the moped is smaller and slower than those other vehicles, it's vital that the mopedalist acquires the knowledge, skills, and good judgment needed to ride safely in traffic. So let's take a look at the facts of life that can help make any moped-rider relationship a happy and safe one.
When you start out the engine and it's cold, don't forget to use a choke so it'll shut
The
off
most
the air.
obvious fact is that the novice must become thoroughly familiar with the machine before riding in traffic. First, some general information. As the word moped suggests, the vehicle employs two power sources, a motor and pedals. While there are many models on the market, all mopeds are equipped with single-cylinder engines rated at between 1 and 2 horsepower and capable of producing speeds of between 20 and 30 miles an hour. Horsepower and maximum speeds allowable are determined by state laws. The pedals are used to start the machine and to allow human power to assist the engine on takeoffs and on hills. At other times, they serve as footrests. The prospective buyer should be aware that most states require the vehicle to have operable pedals and an automatic transmission to merit the benefits of special moped laws. The buyer should also be sure the moped meets federal safety standards. Required safety equipment includes headlight, tail and stop lights, reflectors, rear view mirror, and an extra switch to stop the engine. Before taking that first ride, the beginner must become completely familiar with the moped's controls and starting procedure. Basic controls include the fuel valve, which starts and stops the flow of fuel to the carburetor, an ignition switch, a choke, which aids in starting a cold engine, the throttle, controlled by the right hand grip, and the front and rear brake levers. These are mounted on the handlebars. The moped should always be started outdoors because, like a car, it produces exhaust, which contains poisonous carbon monoxide. The dealer can demonstrate the correct way to start a particular model. A moped is usually started on its stand, but many people started by pedaling on the road. The next step for the beginner is to get acquainted with the machine in operation. A quiet parking lot or side street is a good place to learn basic riding skills. At first, the new rider should concentrate on maintaining proper balance and riding position, body erect, arms bent slightly, and feet firmly on the pedals. The novice must learn to maintain course and maneuverability at different speeds, and develop the reflexes needed to use the throttle and brakes instinctively. Control of the machine must become automatic. The beginner should practice stopping and starting frequently to get the feel of the machine's capabilities. When braking, the rider must learn to maintain a straight line and to stop at a given point. Normally, the rider should apply both the front and rear brakes in stopping. The front wheel brake supplies most of the moped's braking power, and the rider must be able to use it properly. The novice should also acquire the habit of pedaling briefly from a stop to build up speed faster. Practice leaning into turns, and learn to keep the pedals horizontal when cornering so they won't hit the ground. All these skills must be mastered before the rider takes to the streets.
You gotta talk your parents into buying one of these.
I've been working on it, but can you picture my dad riding one of these?
Why not? My grandparents do.
Riders who know the facts of life about moped safety see the wisdom in wearing a helmet, even though it's not mandatory in most states. Appropriate clothing includes a long-sleeved shirt or jacket to protect the arms, long trousers, and of course shoes or boots to protect the feet. Bicycle clips or rubber bands should be used to keep flared cuffs from becoming entangled in the moped's moving parts. The Because the moped is small and has a narrow profile, the rider should do everything possible to be visible in traffic. Bright clothing and riding with the headlight on help make the rider more readily visible to motorists. The horn can help too, and the rider should not hesitate to use it. Despite these precautions, riders should always assume they are invisible to motorists. They often are. For example, here the mopedalist is hidden behind the driver's windshield post. The rider must be prepared to yield the right-of-way in this situation. The mopedalist should also be aware of blind spots behind cars. Because mopeds generally travel on the right side of the lane, they often are invisible to motorists making sudden right turns. The cautious rider avoids this problem by slowing down and putting more space between the vehicles. This makes the mopedalist visible in the driver's rearview mirror and gives the rider more time to react to a sudden turn. Since the mopedalist is even less visible in the dark, night riding should be kept to a minimum. However, when a night ride is unavoidable, the sensible rider always wears light-colored clothing, uses reflective tape on his or her jacket and helmet, and stays on well-lit streets as much as possible. Day or night, the mopedalist should use common sense in deciding where to ride. The moped was not designed for off-road use, and any attempt to take it over dirt trails could be damaging to machine and rider alike. Thoughtful riders respect the moped's docile nature and therefore limit the machine to smooth, well-paved roads and streets. Since the moped is tame and docile, even at top speed, wise riders try to avoid competing with fast-moving traffic. Whenever possible, they choose less traveled streets over busy thoroughfares. On any street, the mopedalist must be prepared to cope with certain inevitable hazards, such as chuck holes, sewer drains, trash, and assorted automobile droppings. The alert mopedalist will reduce speed to a crawl and steer around such hazards whenever possible. Railroad tracks are another common obstacle. The rider should cross them at an angle as close to 90 degrees as possible, keeping a firm grip on the handlebars. Wet, slippery streets pose a special hazard to the mopedalist. To prevent skids, the rider should reduce speed, avoid sudden changes in direction, and allow extra braking distance. The rider should always avoid braking while in a curve, even on dry pavement. No matter how good the road, careful mopedalists always use common sense when carrying passengers and other loads. Many mopeds are strictly one-person vehicles, so riders should carry passengers only if the machine is clearly equipped for such travel and state law allows it. A passenger should hold on to the rider's waist, keep feet on the foot pegs at all times, and lean with the rider in turns. Above all, riders carrying passengers must remember to compensate for the additional weight by allowing extra stopping distance.
Was that who I thought it was?
No, it couldn't be.
Let's find out.
Transporting less lively cargo requires care too. Riders should always distribute the weight evenly between baskets to maintain good balance. Sensible riders never hand carry anything because both hands must be on the handlebars at all times. Baggage must be tied securely to the moped using elastic fasteners or tie-downs if necessary. The rider should also make sure no loose ends are hanging and that the load doesn't hide the vehicle's lights. In mopedaling, common sense and courtesy go hand in hand. Thoughtful riders signal all turns and lane changes well in advance to give motorists time to react. Being courteous helps ensure their own safety. At intersections, courteous riders are always willing to yield the right-of-way to larger, more powerful vehicles. It's just common sense to do so. traveling in pairs, thoughtful riders never impede speedier traffic by riding side by side. If a frustrated motorist tries to squeeze by, the car may force the riders together in a most unromantic way. Experienced mopedalists avoid such entanglements by riding single file, keeping an adequate space cushion between themselves and other vehicles. A moped's speed is reduced considerably when climbing steep hills. So if traffic starts to back up, the courteous rider will pull off the road and let motorists pass unhindered. Of course, there are always a few thoughtless riders who seem bent on endangering both themselves and others. They're the ones who weave in and out of traffic, ride illegally on sidewalks, and take occasional shortcuts through the corner gas station.
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
If such foolish riders survive to a ripe old age, it won't be because they haven't made enemies. Courteous mopedalists, on the other hand, always ride within the bounds of law and reason. They share the road willingly, showing respect for the rights of other motorists and pedestrians. Among the facts of life dealing with moped safety, none is more important than the maxim that says, always expect the unexpected. Riders who live by this rule try to anticipate safety problems before they occur. It begins with a pre-ride inspection to make sure the moped is in safe working order. Are the brake levers operating smoothly? Are all the cables connected? Are tires properly inflated and free of cuts or other damage? Chain tight enough? Is the throttle working smoothly? Are lights, switches, and horn all working? A pre-ride inspection may take a little time, but if it prevents an accident, it's time well spent. In traffic, riders who expect the unexpected practice a defensive attitude. They keep their eyes moving, scanning the road for potential hazards. They use the rear view mirror and frequent head checks to stay aware of traffic behind them. Defensive riders always assume a car door will open at the most inopportune time, so they're seldom surprised. And because a ball rolling into the street is often followed by an impetuous child, defensive riders will always be ready for a sudden stop. Even at a green light, defensive riders slow down and check traffic before proceeding. It should be obvious by now that learning to ride a moped safely is not really difficult. The beginner should keep these three basic facts of life in mind. First, become thoroughly familiar with the machine and its operation before riding in traffic. Second, use common sense and courtesy when riding. Make yourself visible, ride on less traveled streets as much as possible, and yield the right-of-way to larger vehicles. And third, always expect the unexpected. Be a defensive rider.
Oh my gosh! When did you get this?
Just now.
I can't believe he actually bought one.
Yep, from now on, this is the way I get to work.
Can I try it out?
Well, you've got to know what you're doing.
It's all right. I taught her the facts of life. About moped safety, I mean.
A lot of scooters in Raleigh, and they are not mopeds. They're just loud scooters. I'm not sure the rules think it's under a certain horsepower, they're allowed to go without license. And there's all sorts of transgressions with them riding on sidewalks, basically ignoring traffic signals, etc. And they go all hours of the day and night. So there you go. It's kind of third worldish, like in that form of transportation is all over the world and gets people from point A to point B. All right, so behind me I have a film set up on the telecine, and it answers the question, what is wrong with vandalism? Maybe we'll find out. Enjoy.
There are a lot of things about you that other people see every day. But deep inside you is something that other people don't always see, your feelings. A lot of the time you probably feel happy, but sometimes you might feel other ways. For instance, suppose you own something you liked a lot, and one day you accidentally broke it. If this happened to you, you'd probably feel very sad. The more important the thing was to you, or the harder it was to replace, the worse you would probably feel. It might take you a long time before you started feeling happy again. Other people have feelings too, and even though different people might look different on the outside, most people's feelings work about the same way yours do. Like you, other people are often happy. Once in a while, they have reasons for feeling sad too. Of course, like everyone else, you have a lot more feelings than just happy and sad. Sometimes you feel bored or angry. And sometimes you feel like doing something you know you shouldn't do. For instance, there might be times when you feel like damaging something or breaking something on purpose. Everyone has feelings like this at one time or another, even adults. But why do people have these feelings? Sometimes people feel they'd like to damage something because they're bored and looking for something to do, or because they're curious about what will happen if they break something, or because they want to show off and think that might be a good way to do it, or even because they're angry with themselves or with another person. But whatever causes these feelings, suppose people just allowed them to run wild. The world would be a noisy mess, and everything would be broken. No one wants that. So people have to learn how to manage these feelings. But suppose you don't manage these feelings, and you damage something on purpose. That's called vandalism. It isn't vandalism if you damage something by accident. And it isn't vandalism if you want to damage something but don't. It's only vandalism if you actually do it. Suppose one day you decided to break something just for fun, something that belonged to someone else. Suppose the thing didn't look very important to you. You might think, what would be the harm in breaking it? It takes some imagination to see the harm. One way to see it is to imagine how you might feel if someone broke something of yours. You might feel afraid and worry about what else the person might do. Or you might feel sad that anyone would do something like that. Or you might feel angry because you think you don't deserve to have your things broken. Even if the broken thing didn't look important to anyone else, it could have been very important to you for all sorts of reasons. Maybe you just happen to like it a lot. Or it was a gift from someone very special to you. Or you had some especially good times with it. Whatever your reasons for liking it, if someone broke it on purpose, you would probably feel terrible. So it's easy to see that if you broke something that belonged to someone else, the other person might feel just as terrible, and that's where the harm would be. But that's not the only harm. Someone would have to clean up the mess, and that would take time. And suppose the owner wanted to replace what was broken. That would take time too, and cost money. And it's possible that there wouldn't be enough money to buy another one. Then what? The owner would have to get along without it. So it's pretty easy to see that if you damage something that's owned or used by someone else, you can really cause a lot of harm. But what if you damage something that's used not just by one person, but by many people? Suppose you were very angry about something, and suppose you didn't control that feeling, but instead took your anger out on something many children use, a swing on your school playground, for instance. There would be many people who couldn't use the swing, maybe for a long time, and they would probably all feel bad. What else would happen? Someone would have to repair the swing or replace it, and that would take time and money, money that might have helped to buy something else, like a new slide or a new teeter-totter, but now it couldn't be spent that way. So if you didn't control your anger and you broke the swing, you'd really be taking something away from a lot of people, people you know. What if you damaged something that belonged to someone you didn't know? Suppose you saw a flower garden, and you had a feeling it might be fun to tear up that flower garden, and you didn't control that feeling. What would be the harm in that? You might not care about flowers. The flower garden might not be important to you at all. But it is very important to somebody, and that person would probably feel terrible because of what you did. But what if you damage something that doesn't look like it's owned by anybody? For instance, what if you decide to write on the wall of a large building, like a post office, or your school, or a restaurant, or a department store? Would that harm anyone? The answer is yes. Every building is owned by somebody, sometimes by more than one person, sometimes by many people. You might not know the owners. They might even live far from you. But whoever the owners are, in one way or another, they would have to pay to repair the damage. So if you feel like damaging something on purpose, and if you don't control that feeling, but actually do some vandalism, you don't just hurt a thing. In one way or another, you also hurt real people. That's what's wrong with vandalism. But no matter what your feelings are, if you try hard enough, you can manage them. Sometimes that's not easy, and there might be one time when it's especially hard. Suppose you're with some friends, and they feel like doing something they shouldn't do, like breaking a window. But you don't want to break the window. You do feel that you want your friends to like you, so at a time like this, it might be very difficult to keep from going along with them. Once again, though, it helps to think about what might happen next. Suppose you do break the window. Then what? A broken window can be very dangerous. Someone could get seriously hurt, maybe you or one of your friends. And vandalism is against the law, so you could get into serious trouble. But even if these things didn't happen, someone would still have to clean up the mess and pay for a new piece of glass and put it in. That would be a lot of trouble for somebody. So for all these reasons, you'd need to manage your feelings and not go along, even though that might be very hard. It could be that some of your friends don't really want to break the window either, but no one wants to be the first to say so. So if you speak up, you might actually be doing some of your friends a favor, and you'd be helping to stop something that could be really harmful. But what if sometimes you really have a lot of trouble managing your feelings, no matter how hard you try? Then you should talk about the problem with someone you trust. An adult might be able to help you think of ways you can handle your feelings without vandalizing. The important thing is to remember that in one way or another, vandalism always hurts real people. So if you feel like damaging something, and you manage that feeling, you have every right to feel another way. Proud of yourself.
So, let's stop this. It's interesting. So, Cornette's original series, that this is a kind of a variation on, or it's a reboot of, is that what we say when we talk about film? This was originally the Beginning Responsibility series. And they call it now the Taking Responsibility series. So it's a different philosophy. Kids are originally introduced to the concept of responsibility for their actions. And this one is like, no, we want you to take the responsibility. So they cover similar ground. Although it's interesting that this one, you have one very specific things about. I think there are beginning and response. There are parallels between the two, but it's a different age. This was the 80s, so things are different. All right, this film is a little warbly, but it's pretty great. It's about soap. Enjoy.
Carl Mason is planning a class demonstration of soap making. To make the soap, Carl uses fat and lye. First, he weighs out the lye, or sodium hydroxide, as it is usually called in a laboratory. Since the sodium hydroxide must be in solution to make soap, Carl pours the solid sodium hydroxide into water. When they are mixed, heat develops. So Carl sets the solution aside to cool while he adjusts the balance to weigh out the fat needed. He uses about 7 times as much fat as he does sodium hydroxide. This is clean, waste kitchen fat that Carl collected at home. It should make good soap. The fat must be warmed before mixing the sodium hydroxide with it. A mixing temperature of about 100 degrees Fahrenheit gives good results. The flame quickly warms the fat. Then Carl begins to add the sodium hydroxide. It is the reaction between sodium hydroxide and fat to form soap. What is the nature of this reaction? Let's consider this a molecule of fat consisting of a glycerin part and an acid part. And let's consider these molecules of lye consisting of sodium parts and hydroxide parts. Now, when these molecules interact, the sodium parts of the lye molecules go with the acid part of the fat molecule, and the hydroxide parts of the lye molecules go with the glycerin part of the fat molecule. This reaction results in 3 molecules of soap and 1 molecule of glycerin. Fat plus lye gives soap plus glycerin. This process is called saponification. Saponification is what occurs when fat and lye react. In commercial soap making, the glycerin is usually removed. In about 10 minutes, or as soon as the mixture of sodium hydroxide and fat has a honey-like texture, it is ready to pour into a mold. This mixture should stand several days more before it is used, so that all of the fat and lye will react to form soap and glycerin. Carl's soap has been standing for more than a week, and he thinks it is ready to use. It has a fine texture and should have good cleansing qualities. But before Carl tries out his soap to see how well it will remove dirt, let's take a close look at hands we say are dirty. In a close view, the skin would look something like this. Notice the oil film on the skin and the dirt particles suspended in it. Seen even closer, it would look something like this. The oil and the dirt particles coat the skin. Now, when we use soap and water to wash our hands, what happens? For one thing, the oil film breaks up into small globules. That is, it emulsifies. And a layer of soap, 1 molecule thick, coats the skin, the oil globules, and the dirt particles. Closer still, it would look like this. The soap molecules not only free the oil and dirt from the skin, but help keep them from becoming attached again if they touch a clean spot as the washing continues. The soap films are indifferent to each other, and so the oil globules and dirt particles can easily be rinsed off. Notice that oil globules or dirt particles that drop toward the skin during washing do not become attached again. Thus, through washing and rinsing, oil and dirt particles are cleaned away. But a layer of soap molecules, invisible to the eye, remains on our hands even after rinsing. Now, we will see soap making on a commercial scale. This is the receiving yard of a large soap-making plant. Here, fats and oils arrive in carload lots. This man collects a sample from a tank car that has just come into the yard. The sample he takes will be tested to make sure it is of good quality. After testing, the fat and oil in the tank car are pumped to the refinery. Here, pipes lead the fat and oil to huge kettles. The refinery man opens a valve, and the oily mixture pours into the kettle. Here it is heated with a solution that removes acid impurities. In a few hours, when the impurities have settled out, the refined oil, mixed with bleaching substances, goes to the filter press room. These filters separate out the bleaching substances that have removed colored impurities from the oil. A pressman collects a sample of the fine, clean, bleached oil. If the color appears satisfactory at this stage, and after further tests, the bleached oil will be pumped to the soapery to be used for soap making. This oil serves the same purpose as the fat Carl Mason used in his laboratory demonstration. In this room, called the soapery, refined and bleached oils that have passed required tests are mixed with lye and heated to make soap. This soap maker checks the mixtures in the kettles. In this kettle, the operation of saponifying and purifying the soap has been going on for nearly a week. This reaction is the same as in the laboratory demonstration. The soap maker now makes tests to see whether saponification is complete. The feel of the mixture indicates whether there is any fat that has not reacted. The taste indicates whether any lye remains. This soap seems just right, so the soap maker collects a sample for a more accurate check in the chemical laboratory. Soap that passes all these tests goes to the drying room. The soap, still in liquid form, first falls into a trough and on to a huge revolving roller. The roller carries off a continuous thin layer of the liquid soap. The soap layer cools on the roller and falls in clean white ribbons. A conveyor belt carries the ribbons of soap into a drying oven. After drying, the soap travels on to this hopper. From the hopper, a measured batch of soap falls into the mixer. The mixer operator opens the safety guards to pour in preservatives, perfumes, and other materials needed in soap making. He adds these ingredients to give special qualities to the soap. In a few minutes, the mixing is completed. Then the soap drops onto this revolving screw that feeds it into the bar-forming machine. The soap leaves the bar-forming machine in one continuous bar. A knife cuts the soap into sections. Then, fine wires cut the sections into individual cakes. A moving rack carries the cake to an inspector's table. The inspector places the cakes on an endless belt. The soap is now ready for stamping and wrapping and to start on its way to our home.
It was dry, all right, but big fan of that process. And let's watch a kid make soap in the lab. And so that film was warped when it was transferred, and so somebody was holding their finger on it. It was probably an intern of mine or assistant of mine, or maybe me, to kind of keep it in conjunction, keep it in contact with the sprocketed wheel, and you could hear that weird kind of sound, which was some problem with the soundtrack. So there you go. All right, so behind me I got another film threaded up. I should say I appreciate you guys' comments and sticking with me You can support us by hitting the thumbs up button or the like button, or telling people about what we do. You can also buy us coffee at ko-fi.com/avgeeks. That's one way you can reward us, is keeping us caffeinated during the rough times. So this next film, I need to change the title, is it's another question, or maybe it's not. It's how a hamburger turns into you. And this is a nutrition film, and what I discovered is a lot of nutrition films in the 20th century are actually made by the Dairy Council. And I've often thought about that. Like, why would they do that? Like, why are they the ones talking about what is a good diet? Well, I think one of the reasons is because it is an advertisement for dairy, for the products that they make, to say that dairy is an important part of the American diet, even though there are other cultures where there is no dairy in their diet, and they seem to be doing fine. So it's kind of an interesting way to, like, well, we're going to talk about nutrition, and since we're the ones talking about nutrition, this is what we're going to highlight. And that's problematic of Western culture, is a lot of people who tell us what is good to eat are benefiting from that. And those that are declining to tell us what's not good to eat are also benefiting from that. So here's a wonderful intro to the film, the focus leader, etc. So enjoy.
Before the film begins, the volume and tone are identical with the soundtrack which follows.
Let me have a hamburger, please. It's pretty apparent that there's a connection between eating and growing. But how does a hamburger turn into me?
Or a grape, or milk, or an egg. We eat a fantastic variety of foods, all tastes, all colors, all shapes. But all of them come from living things. What are living things made of? What are you made of?
Slugs and seals and puppy dog tails. Sugar and spice and everything nice.
Atoms and molecules.
That's right. You're made of atoms. And the atoms are joined together to form molecules. About 60% of the molecules in your body are water. Some 7% are minerals, calcium in the bones and iron in the blood and others. 1% are carbohydrates, which are sugars and starches. 14% are fats. And about 18% of the molecules in your body are arranged in combinations called proteins. Other living things are also made up of molecules of water, and minerals, and carbohydrates, and fats, and proteins in varying amounts.
I see. The things I eat are made out of the same ingredients I'm made out of. So, I just eat the food and use the ingredients.
That's true, but it's not as simple as that. Take proteins, for example. Life has many forms. There are millions and millions of different kinds of living things. And in each of them, there are tens or hundreds or thousands of different kinds of proteins. And no two kinds of the proteins are exactly the same. For example, all the different proteins in corn are different from all the different proteins in a fish, which are different from all the different proteins in a cow, which are different from all the different proteins in you.
Then how can we get the kind of proteins we need? We'd have to eat other people.
Eat people?
They're the only ones that would have the right kind.
These are protein molecules seen through an electron microscope. They're big for molecules. Some of them are made out of as many as 200,000 atoms. Still, 10,000 of these protein molecules could fit into one insignificant corner of a small grain of sand. A protein molecule is put together in the form of long chains, twisted and turned upon themselves. The links that make up the chains are smaller molecules called amino acids. There are 20 different kinds of amino acids, represented in this model by 20 different kinds of beads. In how many ways can 20 different things be combined? Actually, 20 objects can be arranged in about 1,100 billion ways. But even the smallest protein is made of many more than 20 amino acid building blocks. Amino acids are repeated along the chain, and the different combinations possible are more than anyone can count. And that's the way it is in nature. There is an unlimited variety of proteins. But all of them, whether in a vegetable or a fish or a man, made of combinations selected from the same 20 kinds of amino acid building blocks. This display represents a typical amount and variety of foods consumed by a 12-year-old American boy in 1 year. There are millions of different kinds of proteins to be found in this collection of foods, but only 20 kinds of amino acids. Your body uses these amino acids to build the particular kinds of proteins that are part of your skin and your hair and your bones and your cells. In other words, you. Here's how the process works. When you bite into food and chew it, you break it up into smaller pieces. In the stomach and in the intestines, digestion breaks these pieces into smaller and smaller bits. Finally, big molecules are split apart into smaller ones. The big protein molecules are split into amino acids. The protein molecule may have been part of a turkey, or part of a glass of milk, But the amino acids that remain are no longer bits of turkey or bits of milk. Now they are simply protein building blocks, the same for all forms of life. The amino acids supplied by the food you eat are absorbed from the intestines into the bloodstream, circulated throughout the body, and delivered to the cells. Each type of cell selects the amino acids it must have to build the particular protein molecules it needs. These steel beams can be put together in many ways. These amino acids can also be put together in many ways. The raw materials are the same. What makes the ship turn out differently from the building?
Plans!
That's right, plans. The amino acids are the same for all living things. What makes an ant turn out differently from you?
Plans?
Right again, plans. Plans that are recorded on molecules in your cells. These are living human cells. In each cell there is a nucleus. And in each nucleus are small bodies called chromosomes. In the chromosomes are molecules of a substance called deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA for short. These DNA molecules are enlarged 4 million times. If you could look even more closely, you'd find that the chain-like molecules are very complex, made out of many thousands of atoms. But the atoms are grouped to form 4 different kinds of units, which are repeated over and over again along the chain of the molecule. It's possible to form a code by varying the arrangement of just 2 units, like dots and dashes. In a DNA molecule, the arrangement of 4 units is varied to form a code which is used to record plans for building protein molecules. This greatly simplified model represents a part of the DNA molecule on which the plans for building one kind of protein are coded. We'll represent the 4 units of the code with 4 distinctive shapes, each different shape painted a different color. Assume that the cell in whose nucleus this DNA molecule is located requires another protein molecule, the kind whose plans are coded here. A molecule of a substance called messenger ribonucleic acid, or messenger RNA, forms on the DNA molecule. When the messenger RNA molecule leaves the DNA, it carries the coded information with it. It is a messenger. These amino acid molecules have reached the cell as the result of the digestion of food. Also in the cell are molecules of transfer ribonucleic acid, or transfer RNA. There's a different kind of transfer RNA molecule to fit each of the 20 different kinds of amino acid building blocks. These bodies in the cell are called ribosomes. They are the assembly line, so to speak, where the protein molecules are put together. As the messenger RNA with the coded plans on it comes in contact with a ribosome, the matching transfer RNA molecules fit into place. And the amino acids are linked together. Result, the amino acids are linked together in the exact order called for by the coded plans on the DNA molecule in your body. And the new protein molecule needed by the cell is built. Even the smallest protein has at least 100 amino acid building blocks, not 6, and we've skipped many in-between steps. But essentially, this is the way a protein molecule is put together in a cell. When a cell needs another protein for purposes of growth or for replacement of a worn part, a molecule of messenger RNA forms on a part of a DNA molecule where the plans for the required protein are coded. The coded plans are duplicated on the messenger RNA, which moves away from the DNA and attaches itself to a ribosome. Amino acid building blocks in the cell each join with their particular variety of transfer RNA. The transfer RNAs, with their appropriate amino acids attached, find their places on the messenger RNA, and the amino acids are linked together. The result is a new protein molecule, put together according to plans.
But a hamburger isn't all protein, is it?
No.
What happens to the other things in it?
Like proteins, molecules of carbohydrates and fats and molecules with atoms of mineral elements attached are broken down by digestion into different kinds of smaller molecules common to all living things. These small molecules move out of the intestines into the bloodstream, which circulates the molecules throughout the body and delivers them to the cells. In the cells, the molecules derived from food can be used as building blocks for the construction of other molecules needed by the body. Or they can be broken down to release the energy stored in them. The energy supplied by food is also used to power the continuous rearrangement and reproduction of molecules in the cells. That is the essence of life. How many separate operations are required to build this building from start to finish? Such things as a shift of gears, a blast of a torch, turning a nut, a blow of a hammer, a sweep of a broom, sighting a transit, pulling a line, making a signal, raising a beam. An estimate: 1 trillion such operations performed over a period of 1 year are required to build this building. The cells of a human body perform 100 times a trillion separate operations in 1 second. It's a complex, fantastic mechanism, this system that changes food into us. but its successful operation is up to us. It can work properly only if it's been supplied with the raw materials it needs. You eat foods of many kinds, which are broken down in your body into basic building blocks that are common to all living things. These building blocks could be put together to form the molecules of any living thing, but they're not, because the plans in your cells are followed, and the building blocks are put together to form the particular substances out of which your body is made.
That's how a hamburger turns into me.
So great. Some people mentioned it when they were coating the RNA in honey, or maybe it was the DNA in honey, the wood blocks in honey. It did look like a candy bar commercial. I was like, that looks delicious. Yeah, I like it. Well, I mean, it's from the 70s, so it has a special place in my heart. And speaking of special places in my heart, I have thank you to Macon, Michael, and William for buying us coffee. I love you all, but Macon, Michael, and William, I love you even more because of the coffee you bought me and bought us here at AV Geeks. You can buy us coffee at ko-fi.com/avgeeks. You can also go to avgeeks.com and see other shows that we have on, and stuff. Lots of other stuff. And you can also buy DVDs there. I'm experimenting with a new store on Square versus Big Commerce, because Big Commerce is very expensive. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. Thank you for letting me borrow your eyeballs for a little more than an hour. We'll be back again tomorrow. Tomorrow's Thursday, right? Yeah. In the meantime, hit like, hit subscribe, thumbs up, all that stuff. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we will see you again tomorrow. All right. Take care.